Hey, Harvey. We got about 16, 17 people. Good evening, everyone. If everyone can find a seat, we can start the presentations. Thank you. Please, there's plenty of seats up front. You don't have to sit in the back. Okay, good evening, everyone. Happy holidays. I'm Glenn Spiritus. I'm your city councilman for District 4. This is a District 4 town hall meeting. We've had, I think this is my third or fourth town hall meeting, and I thank you all for showing up. You always do show up, and I appreciate that. The two major issues tonight, and we have other issues, of course. There's going to be other town hall meetings, and we'll talk about the zoning in the next few weeks. I know that everyone is anxious about the zoning issues on Singer Island. And there's one, by the way, if you're here and you're interested, on Wednesday night, the city council will be voting on a text amendment for the vacant land between the Oasis and the Martinique. That's for a proposed 16-story tower by the Turnberry group. That's the Safa family out of Miami and Aventura. It's a controversial issue. I know some of you like it, some of you don't like it, but please come and be heard by the city council. It's very important. I can assure you, we do hear what you say. I must get at least 20 emails a day on that specific project. So please be there. It's important. And I know there are petitions out there. The council members did get your petitions. I can assure you of that, because I'm also copying on them. So I know that everyone has what you've been working on. And I thank you all for working on this and participating on civic and community issues. That's very, very important. So tonight we want to talk about two major issues. One, beach erosion. Now, of course, that's been a problem on Singer Island, I guess, since I've been living here since 2000. I've been coming down since probably the early 80s, and that's always been an issue on Singer Island. You know, of course, we're a barrier island, and storms do take their toll. Many properties are building seawalls now. I'm sure many of you that are sitting here already have a seawall in front of your property. You do know that right now there are seawalls under construction at the Dunes Tower, at the Sea Grape, and I know those people are here. And also part of the Aquarius is also under construction. Via Delfino is under construction right now, and part of Sea Winds. I know Ocean's Edge will be finishing their seawall this year. I know that 5,000 beachfront, Côte d'Azur are all interested and planning on doing seawalls in the future. That looks the way that we're moving right now is seawalls, but that's not the only answer for beach erosion. That's why we're here this evening. Of course, we're all concerned about the turtles. Of course, we're also concerned about our property. So a dune serves two purposes. But of course, the seawall makes sure that the water doesn't come onto your property. Most of the time. Doesn't always work, but 90% of the time, the storms that we will get here, the seawall will take care of that issue. So we can move on. I'm going to introduce you to our city manager, Jonathan Evans. And by the way, I've been working with Jonathan now for close to 2 years. We're very lucky to have someone with his skills and his mannerism. He sits there, you know, it's very hard to be a city manager. Being a former city manager, I could tell you, you're always under attack. Always, like being in a foxhole. And he handles it real well. He does a great job. The city has made tremendous progress on many issues, whether it be the water plant, the mooring fields, which we'll talk about later on, the firehouses, the new police station. We have a new city hall coming. So there are a lot of things on the drawing boards. We'll talk about that at another town hall meeting. But tonight we're gonna stick to the beach erosion and the mooring fields. And we have representatives from the county here tonight, and the city manager will introduce you to them. And by the way, they brought the whole team with them. So we're very lucky. That means they care about us. And I do know that Commissioner Maria Marino probably would have been here tonight, but we didn't tell her to too late in the schedule. But she does send her best to us, and she does support us. So please remember that we do have a good county commissioner here on Singer Island. Remember, we don't have the same county commissioner that they have on the mainland. On the mainland, they have Bobby Powell is our county commissioner. So we're lucky. We have 2 county commissioners for Riviera Beach. Same thing. We have 2 school board members. So we have the best of all worlds here in Riviera Beach. So Jonathan Evans, our city manager. Thank you. Thank you, David. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson Spiritus, and obviously it's been a pleasure working alongside Councilperson Spiritus because he served in the capacity before, and so I, joke around with my wife that I'm going to end the generational curse. There's not going to be anyone in my family that will be a city manager as long as I'm around to stare them in other professions. But certainly we're excited that you're here this evening. Obviously, we know that the beaches here in our community are absolute paradise. People travel from all over the world to have a couple days with us. You all live in absolute paradise. And so we're excited about the things that we have in place, hopefully to protect what is paradise here in the city of Riviera Beach. And so you'll hear from county staff about ways to really try to address what are the beach erosion challenges. This has been an ongoing issue that has been discussed. And one of the challenges that you'll hear is we can talk about concepts and theories, but what's actually going to work and what is going to get permitted by the regulatory agencies to help facilitate the preservation of our beach. And so you'll hear that there's a lot of work. The city, in partnership with the county, is investing in the study and the results of the study to helpfully address some of the challenges we have. We also do have a new 10-year agreement with the county that contemplates us looking to invest, roughly almost $1 million plus a year to make sure that we replenish our beaches to preserve our paradise here in the city of Riviera Beach. And so you'll hear about what the county is working on, how quickly that they're going to move through the study phase, and then we're going to have more conversations about what the physical infrastructure that's looking to hopefully be put in place to preserve our shoreline here in the city of Riviera Beach. Another item that you'll hear about is our mooring fields, and the city of Riviera Beach has moved forward with facilitating some mooring fields in our community. But one of the things that's more important that we're going to talk about is the enforcement aspect. We have some partners here with us that have taken some aggressive stances in their community to address derelict vessels that are illegally moored in our community. And so we are going to be doing a PSA to our community probably in the next couple of weeks. But I will tell you that come January 1st, we're going to have a full court press on the water, that we're going to make sure that people that are in our community, they can boat, they can recreate, but they can do it the right way. We're going to make sure that the vessels are navigable. We're going to do dive tests, and we're going to have a drone that's going to go underwater to look at their moorings to make sure if they're anchoring or if they're mooring, and to really look to do some things to protect our community. And so Dr. Spiritus was on the meeting with us, and we found a lot of things, and our Chief of Police, Michael Coleman, and his team will share some of the things that we're doing, and then we'll share a little bit about the mooring fields. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to Palm Beach County's Director of the Environmental Resource Management, Ms. Deb Drum, and her team to share with you about what's happening concerning beach erosion and the study that staff is working with their coastal engineers to conduct.
Well, I'll be very brief, by way of introduction. I just wanted to say welcome. I'm very grateful that we were invited to participate in this meeting. We've had quite a few meetings with Councilman Spiritus in the last couple of weeks, and we have ongoing conversations on this issue. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Deb Drum. I'm the Director of Environmental Resources Management for Palm Beach County, and we are here for you, and wanted to I'll just hand it right over to staff, and we'll get started on our presentation.
Good evening, folks. Thank you again for having us here. The county is particularly engaged in this area of our shoreline, as we are throughout the county, but been particularly focused on Singer Island for about 2 or 3 decades now and the problems that are going on there. And we've had a number of efforts that we've had throughout the years looking at long-term feasibility for stabilization, and that's resulted in recent dune restoration. And we're coming back to long-term stabilization for a number of reasons. And that's what we want to get to tonight, is a brief history of how we got here, how we went down this road, and what the future looks like. This first slide is somewhat important to me because it's about 8 years old now, and it represents an ideal what we want Singer Island to look like: a beautiful beach and dune system, healthy habitat for sea turtles to nest in, but also some of the concerns that make it hard to permit any long-term solutions. You've got that crystal clear water, you've got nearshore hard bottom that's incredibly valuable to permitting agencies that make it very tough to put any kind of a structural solution out there. We also have high density sea turtle nesting. It's listed as critical habitat by the federal government throughout the project area and throughout our county. The next slide is just a brief look at the past 10 years. So if you can see it on the left side, there is a picture of Singer Island from the north end looking south in 2015, so about 10 years ago. Beautiful, wide, healthy beach and dune system. We were already having intermittent erosion problems, but that's really ramped up over the past decade. We've had repeated storm impacts. We've had that translate into seawall installation. We don't fault property owners for protecting themselves, but it does have an effect on the system where it's harder for it to recover on its own without that supply of beach and dune sand. So through various storm impacts, seawall installation, all the things that go into making it a challenging project area, we are now at a condition of, on the right side, this picture was taken last week, where we frequently have the ocean right up to seawalls through about a half-mile section of the project area. That makes it very challenging for us to even do dune restoration. So for us to be able to do dune restoration, we have to be able to place sand on the dry beach. That's a federal and state law. We can't just go put sand in the water without doing extensive permitting. So as we've had this erosion continue to creep into the beach and dune system, we're having more and more challenges keeping the sand on the beach, but also legally placing sand on the beach without exploring some of these more difficult permitting solutions and placing sand in the water and impacting this tremendously valuable nearshore hard bottom. So again, throughout the past 25 years, we've been engaged in dune restoration on Singer Island. We've done dune restoration 4 out of the last 5 years. It's becoming so repetitive that it's hard to keep up with in a budgetary and an engineering sense. We have to be able to, we're gonna hold questions till the end of our, yes, we can make it available. We don't have a problem with that. Yep. So dune restoration has been effective over the last 25 years, but we're reaching a critical tipping point where it's becoming less effective, and that's combining with budgetary constraints. So we've obviously got other focuses in the statewide legislature this year. This has been the first year in a number of years that we haven't been able to secure state funding for a next prospective dune restoration project. That's also happening at the same time that we're having private dune seawall installations that are a challenge for us to physically get around, and some of the project area we can't even place on because there are permitting challenges. So that's leading us back to long-term solutions. Dune restoration is getting harder and harder. Sand's getting more and more expensive and harder to find. We need to look back at the long term of how can we structurally solve this so we can keep that sand in place for a longer period of time rather than being out there every year. This study was initiated in July of this year by the BCC after careful coordination with the city and our consultant. And I just want to give a brief overview of what this study is supposed to do. So these are the 6 main items on this slide that we're looking at to comprehensively engage in this study. First, we want to do a literature review that goes over the entire history of what we've done on Singer Island, all of the prior feasibility studies, all of the prior permitting efforts. We didn't just start today, we started 30 years ago. And we can learn from that and hopefully evolve the permitting agency's perspectives of what might be possible out there. We also need to do data collection. There's a paucity or a lack of wave data on Singer Island. So when we look at wave data, we're getting it from offshore buoys that are located distant from this location. So we actually installed through our engineering consultant 2 offshore wave gauges that are currently collecting data for the first time that we didn't have before. So we can see how this winter storm season impacts the beach and see how locally waves are transmitted to the beach. We also procured a hindcast set of ocean weather data to look at all of that historic wave data so we can feed into our models to see how these potential alternatives might look long term. And that next task is development of alternatives. And that's what our engineering team is here to speak to briefly tonight, is what some of these alternatives might look like, and primarily what the challenges will be with putting those into place. Public engagement is obviously a key part of this study. We want to hear from you. What are your concerns about what some of these alternatives might look like? What are your questions about how hard it is or how easy it is to implement some of these alternatives? Project performance analysis, our engineering team will speak to that. Cost effectiveness of these various alternatives, including not doing anything, including continuing to do dunes. And reporting. We've got a project deadline of July 2027. We're hoping that's the drop dead. The report will be definitely commented and finished by then. Hopefully we can get it done before then, but there's a lot of engineering horsepower that has to go into the study. We're getting a lot of new data to feed in, and the system is changing, and that's what we're hoping to incorporate into the study to hopefully get to agencies eventually and tell them, look, the system has changed since the last time we tried to look at long-term solutions a decade ago. So the next slide, and then I'll hand it off to our engineering team here, looks at our literature review. We've gotten our engineering team voluminous data on our past efforts, and that really started in the early 90s. We know Singer Island erosion has been going on for longer than that, but it really started to come to a head in the 80s and 90s, where we looked, what can we do about this long term? So very similar, but early on feasibility studies looking at similar things resulted in a number of alternatives. We went down the path through the late 90s and the early 2000s of attempting to model and permit a number of those alternatives. That resulted in a permitting effort with the state and federal agencies to try to put in breakwaters, near shore and offshore. The problem we ran into was that the federal commenting agencies that have the regulatory authority couldn't agree with the state agencies on what their preferred alternative was. There was too many impacts to the turtles on one side or too many impacts to the fish on the other side. And it reached such an impasse that we had a workshop with the BCC around about 2012 to try to get over this impasse, get them all together in the same room. What can we all do to get together and agree that the no action alternative or the dune only alternative is not going to work long term? We could not get them to agree. The board directed us at that time to cease efforts in this long-term feasibility process until conditions have changed. We had a 2010 study that looked at the no action alternative over this very same period of time that we've experienced, and it's predicted exactly what's happened. You will experience repetitive beach losses to the point of having moderate to no beach, and you will have difficulty even putting a dune in. You will see increased seawall installation. The agencies didn't necessarily agree with us that that would happen at that time. Now we've seen that come to bear. Now we feel like we can reapproach that long-term alternative, study it, get it in front of the agencies and say, look, conditions have changed much like we said they would, but we're at a point of no return. We have to do something else. What we're doing isn't working long-term. So what can we do? The feasibility study is, what can we do? It is, how can we approach this from an engineering perspective to show our leaders that this is worth engaging in again? Our BCC told us in 2012, stop engaging in this. We spent a lot of money, but now we're at a point where we can bring new data to them and hopefully seek a long-term solution that they, the residents, that all of the stakeholders can support. We want this to be unbiased, this study. In past studies, we had tried to lean one direction or another. Maybe breakwaters is the best solution. This time around, we want to say, what is the best solution economically and physically for the system? We don't want to say we want breakwaters for sure. We want breakwaters or groins or a beach fill to be the option that rises up from the data. So we're very keen on letting our engineering team do their work, use their data to arrive at the most cost-effective solution to stabilize long-term and a permittable solution. And that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. We've got all those resources out there, critical habitat for all these agencies, that will make it very difficult to permit. But with this new data, with all of these recent losses of sea turtle nests this past year, we want to bring that to these agencies and look, say, look, the system has changed. We can't keep doing the same thing. Here's what we can propose to do. We just have to agree to meet in the middle. So that's what this feasibility study is all about, finding a way to meet in the middle. With that, I will turn it over to our engineering team. We've got Steve Howard, a professional engineer with Foth Olson, Ben Gross up here on the stage, also a professional engineer, Chris Creed, professional engineer, principal with Foth Olson. We've got Mike Stahl, our deputy director of the department, who has an extensive history and knowledge of this project as well. We'll go through the brief engineering alternatives, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Howard. I'm with Foth Olson Associates. Actually, we were Olson Associates. I've been with them since about 1999. We were acquired by Foth in 2024. We've stabilized shorelines all over the world, including structural and non-structural, and we're here to help solve your problem if we possibly can. Andy mentioned a performance analysis that we're going to do, an alternatives analysis. So we're going to look at various things that could possibly work to stabilize your shoreline. We're going to model them numerically with a process-based morphologic model. What that means is we take the measured waves that we are currently collecting right now and all the data we have, we put them into the model, and the model actually moves the seabed in response to those waves and currents, and also in response to any structures that you put in place. So we can see what happens to the sand long-term and near-term after you put these solutions in place, how effective they might be, what might happen to the downdrift shoreline. And along those lines, we have several performance criteria that we're going to look at. How are we going to judge success for all of these things? Number one, does it work? Will it stabilize the shoreline? And the alternatives you see tonight, we believe will work in one way or another. They all have different problems, if you will, or complications, things that make them tricky or may work better than another. The potential for downdrift impacts. If you put sand in one place and you lock it down with structures, that erosion potential doesn't go away. So that there is no free lunch, literally. The downdrift shoreline is still going to want to erode, and sometimes it'll erode faster in response to structural solutions. So we definitely don't want to cast our problems to our neighbors to the immediate south. A big one, and what hampered this 15 years ago, was the potential for environmental impacts, both direct, in other words, sand burial or putting structures in place, and indirect. That sand goes somewhere if it's not completely still, and it's not. So will it wash over the reefs to the south? And environmental impacts here are predominantly turtles, birds, fish, and of course the lovely nearshore rock that you guys have. All are equally prized by the resource agencies and all need to be carefully considered when you're looking through these alternatives and what they're going to do to each one. And along those same lines, the ability to secure state and federal permits. This is probably one of the bigger ones. We can put things that might work, but there may be no way you're getting permitted. I think all of these that you're going to see will impact the nearshore rock to some degree. You want a beach there. That nearshore rock is right out mean low water. It's going to get buried to one degree or another. So that's another one of these opportunities to come with the resource agencies and meet in the middle. Right? You're losing turtle habitat as it stands right now. So if you have no beach, you have no turtles. If we provide a beach, we're going to have to bury the rock. So there's a definite balancing act that all of these alternatives are going to provide and have to be analyzed, and we hope to do that for you. And lastly, the cost to build it. Some of these might be more expensive than others, especially long term. With that, let's start off by the obvious one. Build a big beach. Just put fill here. We do it all over the county. We do it all over the state. We do it all over the country. Now, it's not without issues. Of course, permanency is the biggest issue. And in Southeast Florida, you guys are running out of sand resources. So in order to keep this up, not to mention the amount of rock it would naturally bury, the sand's going to go south towards the inlet. So there's all kinds of impacts associated with an unstabilized beach fill. While it seems simple, it's really not. And it's probably one of the more complex ones that you'll have to permit and also long-term provide renourishment volume for. And before I go through these in detail, these are basically concepts, right? We're saying these are all things that we sat down, all of our engineers who've designed dozens, some of us, hundreds of these kinds of structures all over the world, and said, what will work here? Not necessarily what will be permittable or what will be cheap or what will be fast, but what will work? How would we stabilize the shoreline regardless of other issues? And those issues will get filtered out as we go through our analysis, and we'll come up with a matrix and a rubric of success for each one of these things. But these are just the kind of things that we will be looking at. The first one is a T-head groin field. We built these all over, and you can see the top pane there. North is to your right. And we've just zoomed in here on the bottom left to show you kind of exactly what these are. And this is a field of repetitive structures, and they're called T-heads because they look like T's. And to on the bottom right is just an example project. This is Fisher Island in Miami. One of the first, well, it's the first use of imported aragonite, and our Olson Associates built this groin field and this beach way back in the 90s, 1990. So you can see these are pretty low profile structures. They don't really block your view. They're there to kind of guide the beach profile. And what they're very, very good at, as you can see in the Fisher Island example, is really locking up the sand in little cells. And you can see they make little crenulated embayments in their lee, and those stay pretty well. They rarely need to get renourished. Now, one potential complication with this is you lock up all that sand, you interrupt the natural sand flow from north to south. It does have a nice potential for a longshore or downdrift impacts to your neighbors. So that's one of the drawbacks with this system. Very good at locking up sand, maybe a little too good. And also, I'd like to point out that the brown shading is beach fill. All of these structural alternatives require at least an initial beach fill to kind of seed it, if you will. There's nothing designed about the size that it's shown. It's very notional. The structures are order of magnitude correct design with respect to whatever the hold a beach fill relation to your wall. The way these are designed is the gap spacing and the distance offshore of each one of the T-heads is of primary importance as to where that embayment will end up. And you want it away from your seawall, but not so far that you're building a giant beach. So it's really a balancing act with this design too. So keep in mind that these are notional concepts, just very, very early stage conceptual designs. And next, low profile groins with a beach fill again. So zooming in, you can see these are very, very short groins. I think from your seawalls, they probably stick out about 150, 160 feet on average. They'd be spaced very close together to make little tiny cells. They don't lock up the sand as well as the T-heads do, which is good. It'll come and go. And one example you see here is the Deerfield Beach groins. That's kind of how this concept is stylized. Those groins were built in the 50s by Per Brun, and they work exceptionally well by holding that beach. And sand there will come and go, but they're always the first thing to attract sand when things start recovering. They've been very effective. They're very short. They're very low. They're small, relatively unobtrusive. Now, they have contributed to downdrift impacts as well. Again, as he said, as you lock up sand, you interrupt that supply of sand, you have to look at what it's going to do to the downdrift shoreline. Sometimes you can quantify how much volume that's going to take. I'm going to cause X cubic yards of impacts downdrift, and you can mitigate for that. Okay, well, we're just going to have to place some down there in order to offset what our structures are going to cause. That's fine. But these have worked very well. It's a very interesting alternative, and it's a kind of a proven concept not too far from here. Next are segmented breakwaters, also with a beach fill. Now, these are sited relatively near shore, so close to shore. And one thing you'll notice is the curvature of the shoreline in their lee. That's called a salient, where it pushes out in the lee. That's where the waves come around. They wrap around the breakwater and kind of push the sand out towards the breakwater. And what you want to avoid is a tombolo, and that's where that salient will actually touch your structure. When that happens, that really locks up the sand and interrupts the downdrift impacts. And that was one of the things that was a sticking point in the previous breakwater design, is they really, at least initially, through peer review, didn't prove that they're not going to make a tombolo, which adds to increasing permit issues because it locks up the sand and causes downdrift impacts. So it's something we want to avoid. So the design of these structures is very particular. And just with the T-heads, it's all associated with the gap spacing and the distance offshore. If it's not right, it's either not going to work or it's going to work too well. So it's a balancing act. In a similar alternative, we've taken and used fewer breakwaters with bigger spacing and moved them further offshore. This kind of allows for formation of a strong salient, in other words, a robust beach in their lee, but lessens the chances that tombolos are going to form and you're going to cause downdrift impacts. So it's playing with the spacing of them. Also probably a little more visually appealing if you're sitting on the beach. Both of these breakwater alternatives would be emergent. In other words, they'd be visible through all tide stages. We'll discuss submerged breakwaters, but as a firm, and our experience suggests that they just simply don't work that well. And with rising sea level, they get less effective over time. They're just not a real great alternative, and we are not going to model them unless specifically directed to. We will discuss them. And then the last one I wanted to share was a segmented breakwaters, basically forming a headland with a beach fill. Now, the example here, as you can see, are the 32nd Street breakwaters in Miami. They've been around for quite a long time now. They do cause a tombolo in this effect. We believe we can design them a little bit different so they don't lock up quite as much sand. But the design principle here is a little bit different than the other ones. The idea here is to provide a backwater effect of sand. In other words, you clog it up just enough to get sand to stack up to the north. And the ones in 32nd Street, they go about that effect. You can kind of see how the beach gets skinnier and skinnier as it goes up until it kind of matches the beach from thence north. And it goes about 4,000 feet or so to the north just with this little structure. So we'd like to explore this alternative with a slightly different design than was done in 32nd Street to maybe lessen the tombolo effect there. And this one does does impact the downdrift shoreline and hopefully mitigate some of that. And perhaps work in another alternative that's not pictured that involves this with maybe another structure or two further north, just in case that backwater isn't as strong if you don't make a tombolo. But I'd like to explore all of those. And one of the main things we think is going to be problematic as we go through the permitting process is nearshore hard bottom. And we'll have Chris will come up here and speak to that, or he can stay right there if you want. Yeah, I can go up there. Yeah.
Yeah, good evening. Chris Creed with Fothos Olson also. And I have quite a bit of experience with permitting projects like this in Southeast Florida. We've done quite a few of these projects in Broward County as well as Palm Beach County over the years. And we're very familiar with the process of the steps. So impacts to hard bottom is not an impossible thing to permit, but there are certain things that we have to do to go through that process and demonstrate and justify the need for those impacts. So that, as Steve, I'm reiterate that balancing act that we have to go through as part of our study. We have to worry about impacts to, the threatened and endangered species, particularly sea turtles. There are the rock, they forage on the rocks, so they get looked at from the sea turtle perspective. These are, resources of, oh, thank you. Resources are important to the state of Florida as well under the submerged lands, but also they're essential fish habitat, and they're regulated under the Magnuson-Stevenson Fisheries Act. And we have to go through an EFH assessment to also determine what loss of function the rock might occur to the rock, and how that might be an impact to the overall ecosystem of the rock itself. However, we can justify this if we can demonstrate, and part of our job and what we've talked about a lot with this project is you demonstrate need, and you have to balance that need with impact. And so we want to develop a justification for whatever action we present forward, and then demonstrate that we are minimizing the impact to the greatest extent possible. And so we're demonstrating that balancing act as we go through the regulatory process. But then we may also, if there are impacts, we have to go through the mitigation process. So this is the rock that we're talking about. You guys have spent a lot of time swimming out there. The top slide is right along where the condos are located, and the rock on the bottom half of the slide is for the area to the downdrift. And so both of these rock outcroppings are important. We have a great database of information. We know where it is. We know how it functions. And some of it has different value also. We got to go through that process. It's not all the same. And so as we go through the process of evaluating project alternatives, we compare where the impacts might occur and what is the quality of that rock that will be impacted. And we can go through a process of maybe prioritizing areas that have different ranges of quality. So getting to the mitigation phase, if we know we're probably going to have to impact some, there's nothing, it is a significant project cost, and it can range, from $1.5 to $4 million an acre. So that's something that gets incorporated into that. So we'd like to minimize that impact. But a lot of the other biological monitoring and the permitting that goes in also has additional cost, pretty insignificant relative orders of magnitude to the actual cost of mitigation. but the two will be required between the mitigation as well as the additional monitoring, and it will extend for years into the future. But it's not too different than what some of the stuff that the county is already doing for these resources that exist throughout the county. So I'll finish with, the project is between a rock and a hard place, between the walls and the hard bottom offshore. But that is not an unusual thing in Southeast Florida. Broward County faces a lot of that. They've been very successful implementing projects in that part of the world. Steve demonstrated the one down in Miami and on 32nd Street where the breakwaters were constructed. So there are challenges, but they're not insurmountable. And we've been hired to help the county navigate that process through the regulatory phase. So, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, I'm sure there are some questions out there, and I'll leave it to the councilman how we want to handle the format. We're happy to take them however you want.
I think if you have a question, if you mind coming up here, it'd be easier. That way everyone can hear. If we have the microphone, it'd be easier for everyone. If you do that, sir, if you can come up here and ask a question. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, usually I use those terms interchangeably. Impacts are almost always bad when you're doing coastal permitting. But you're right. For instance, if you're going to build coastal structures, say breakwaters out of lime rock, partially that can offset habitat loss because you're building ostensibly new habitat for certain other animals. So yeah, there is a balance there. Primarily, we're talking about negative impacts, though.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about how we found those kind of structures? Matt?
Right. So maintenance is an issue, but they are engineered. I'm not sure some of the groins that you're talking about were engineered at the time. It was probably just the things they did, and as opposed to applying engineering principles 100 years ago. All right, to the construction. So we've learned a lot over the last 100 years, or even the last 30, 40 years, about the design of these structures in the marine environment. Particularly, they're exposed to waves, they're exposed to currents, and the impacts of the storms associated with that. So they will be designed to be stable under those forces, and with the idea that impacts to those on an annual basis would be minimal. Now, do we design for all conditions like a major hurricane, a Hurricane Sandy, or a hurricane, Katrina type thing that has impacted South Florida also? No, there may be some changes, but it usually is just displacement of stones during those events, and they can quickly be replaced and put back in the section. So the type of construction that we anticipate for these would be called rubble mound. It's a mass of boulders, and those boulders are sized. Their individual size are specified to withstand the forces that through the wave gauges that they've mentioned. Through our analysis, like we specify what sizes should be to meet that stability criteria. Right. Well, Yeah, there's several examples. There's the 32nd Street breakwaters out of Miami. You could probably go see those. There are the jetties that exist at each one of these inlets around the county, and also down in Broward County as well as up in Martin County. And so there are examples of the stones that are used for these stabilizing structures.
Ocean Ridge would probably be the.
Ocean Ridge, right? Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yes. Come on up, Marie.
Many, many years ago, the town of Palm Beach had groins, and then they were removed. So was that a contribution? Did that contribute to the erosion and why we send sand from our beach to theirs?
I struggle with that concept too, because in the 50s and 60s, the Southeast Florida was dominated by groins, and here we are, going back there. It's a little strange. I think the erosion potential was always present, and what you had happen at that time, I wasn't around, of course, but it was a battle between neighbors, so to speak. If one person builds a groin field, he casts a downdrift signal to his neighbor. He hires an engineer to build another one, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, you've got almost like your seawalls in Riviera and Singer. You've got a completely armored shoreline with all kinds of different designs. There's no continuity of design. So you have a bunch of competing forces with zero maintenance. So you're going to end up eventually, the bad ones are going to show. You're going to end up with no beach and a bunch of walls, or a bunch of groins sticking out that are derelict, and then you got to go pull them. So I think that
I'd like to add more to say that the 50s and 60s, the groins were installed to preserve the sand that existed on the beach at the time. They weren't installed along with beach restoration. And so we've learned over the time, you can't simply just put a structure like that on the sandy coast without some type of adjacent impact to someone else to cause them to build a structure and so on and so forth. So now the permits will require any structure that's placed on the beach that you predict what type of impoundment that structure might cause of sand, and you have to place it. You have to place it from an external source versus stealing it from the beach system itself. And the groins will not alleviate the need for future sand placement. They're intended to maintain a minimum condition under an extreme no sand condition, so you always have at least some sand along the shoreline, and to slow the erosion process down and extend the time between events, provide access to the beach so you can place additional sand in the future. Any type of solution that here is not a permanent solution that we're going to just finish one day and walk away from. It will take continued maintenance of the structures themselves less frequently, but continued sand placement will occur.
Yes, sir.
For years, we've heard that pretty many jokes, the solution to these maintenance was potentially have a negative effect with regard to the turtles, fish, or surfing, or whatever. Following the installation of any and all of what you have proposed, have there been studies that show that there's been any significant negative effect with regard to the turtles or the fish getting surfed?
that's a great question, and we've asked that amongst ourselves as well.
Yeah, so it's always asked by the
Study done,
what.
what's the cost to lever if you can't document that given any and all of your solutions that cause a negative effect? Why not go forward?
Some of those structures, and maybe the county want to jump in here too, were permitted at a different time in the past, but they haven't, like the Deerfield Beach groin field, for example, no one's ever mentioned that they have an adverse impact to turtles or any of the other. We have the Ocean Ridge groins that I was involved in the permitting with in the 90s and the construction of those, and the county still maintains them today with there's management involved, but there are no documented adverse impacts by these being there. We will continue. We will use these examples that we have in our playbook as we go through the regulatory process to support whatever action we propose there. We completely agree with you, and we fight that fight every day.
And if I can add to that, that was one of the major challenges that we faced the last time that we went through this erosion control project between 2006 and 2012, when the regulatory agencies were starting to evaluate the impacts. they found out that there was no other place where they had these kinds of structures with these kind of wave conditions, with this kind of sea turtle nesting. And so they were not able to determine what those impacts would be. And under those conditions, the federal agencies have to err on the side of the species. So what ended up happening was those federal agencies were saying, if this project were to be built, there was a potential that all sea turtle nesting that happened within the project area would be impacted or eliminated. And so that was a major hurdle for those regulatory agencies to get past. And one of the big reasons why we weren't able to get to the point where we could get a permit to move to construction. So what we have seen more recently is we have seen some of these projects get built in our area. And so it serves as a potential area for us to go and collect that data, and that we can use that to our benefit, as we go through this process moving forward.
And just to add one more thing to that, we are going to continue to do sea turtle monitoring into this coming season. We do not plan to restore the dunes this winter because of the conditions out there on site, but we are going to continue to pay our monitor to collect data. And one of the things that we're looking at is we're going to document these impacts to turtles with no action. So this will be the first time in a while that we haven't built dunes to restore damages because we don't feel that we can, but we'll also be collecting the data, and we'll be showing these agencies, hopefully, that not doing anything can be worse for nesting than trying something. So we're actively collecting the data ourselves, and we have some other examples, pocket examples of similar projects throughout the county that are also gathering data so that that can't be used as an excuse the next time we move to permitting, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
So Delray Beach is actually a really, really good example, and so is the island of Palm Beach. Delray Beach was a federal project that was authorized in 1973. So the first large beach nourishment there was built in 1973. We don't have the regulations today that we did then. So when they built that large project, there weren't as many or any concerns about covering nearshore hard bottom. So they've had a historically successful project, but there's no nearshore hard bottom in the project area that they have to mitigate for. So they're kind of grandfathered in by having this long-term successful project. Similarly, in Palm Beach, they have derelict groins throughout the island. They're actually in the process of replacing, but permitting isn't as much of a challenge because the groin is already there. So they're rebuilding these old dilapidated groins with a much smoother permitting process because they're grandfathered in. The biggest challenge on Singer Island is that we have this exposed nearshore hard bottom, and we have regulatory conditions now that emphasize the importance of that habitat, where if we want to go cover any of it, and any beach fill in the water would involve impacts to the hard bottom, you're going to have to replace like for like the impacts to that hard bottom. So if we're going to impact 20 or 30 acres of hard bottom, we're going to have to build 20 or 30 acres of reef, and we'll have to do it before we build the project. And that takes a tremendously long amount of time. So I sheepishly wish that we would have had this project in place for 50 years, but we can't go back in time. So that's really the biggest challenge, is to look at using offshore sand. It's state waters, so really it's up to the determination of the state as to whether it's a potential borrow area for a local entity, but we have to be able to have the permits to place the sand on the beach. And the biggest challenge is that nearshore hard bottom and impacts to it.
Right, well,
One more follow-up.
The first part of the question.
Yeah, Andy, can you talk about the inlet management plan at Lake Worth Inlet a little bit?
Yes. So offshore of Singer Island and Palm Beach shores, there are some offshore borrow areas that were permitted in the 90s, the 2010s, some of them earlier than that, that are used by the town of Palm Beach and the county to restore beach nourishment projects. Those projects were engineered so that the sand is being taken from an area that's beyond the depth of closure, beyond the area where it would impact the natural flow of sand. So we have very good certainty in an engineering sense that taking sand from those areas is not going to impact the nearshore. In fact, in the case of Palm Beach County's Barrow area offshore of Singer Island, that material was used most recently for Juno Beach, placed updrift, and those large amounts of sand placed updrift were more likely to add to the sand along the nearshore following placement. The other kind of dredging that we have is inlet maintenance dredging. So I would characterize it as 99% of the net average sand flow along our coast is north to south. Sometimes we can get short-term periods of reversal with certain significant storm events that move sand from south to north, but then that's overwhelmed by the amount of north to south movement of sand by natural wave events, mostly through the winter months. Because of that large amount of sand volume moving north to south, inlet management is tremendously complex. But basically, north of the inlet, you're going to get sand that stacks up. So between the rock headlands on Singer Island and the inlet, you get a very stable beach. That's because of the sand holding effects of the inlet. So that north jetty is holding sand from going south, and any sand that continues south of there is spilling into the maintenance dredging channel. That's a federal harbor project that they want to keep dredged out for shipping access. They place all of that material downdrift on Palm Beach. That's because they can document in an engineering sense that that sand should naturally be downdrift, but for this inlet. So this inlet is basically acting as a big sand sucking pump, and to maintain it, to have water access, to have a port there, to have the economics of that, they're required by the state in the adopted inlet management plan to move that sand south. Otherwise, the town of Palm Beach would be tremendously eroded by that effect. And that has happened historically. Palm Beach has made up for that by inlet management and by offshore Barrow area placement. So it's tremendously difficult to manage an inlet, and it's very litigious when you talk about trying to reverse sand flows from their natural pattern. But it's very well documented that the natural pattern of sand flow from the northern county line to the southern county line is 99% north to south. And that's the interest of the state and the adopted inlet management plans, is maintaining that flow. That way you're not impacting downdrift entities. Otherwise, they're going to sue the people to the north.
But that was a common sense question that you asked. I mean, clearly the sand is going from north to south and getting caught at the inlet at Palm Beach shores. The dredging boat there is owned by Palm Beach Island, I believe, and the county runs it, right? You maintain it and you operate it. It would make sense, of course, to put a pipe underneath the dunes and bring them all the way up to the north and have openings in the middle and pump the sand up there. Maybe that's something we can convince people in the future that it makes more sense to just keep bringing the sand around because it'll keep filling in. There's so much sand there that clearly it's not going to impact Palm Beach because there's just so much filling there. It's just a tremendous amount. But I think that's a debate for another day. We do know that the dredge boats, we've all seen them in front of Singer Island, in front of our condos, come and pick up the sand and bring it to Jupiter and Juno Beach. So we know that sand does go from south to north. So it's kind of selective enforcement. I know the Corps of Engineers is the ones who decide where the sand is going to be taken from for these projects. They pick out those areas. But that's a debate for another day. But that was a lot of common sense that you used in coming up with that question. But I don't think we're going in that area. Yes, sir. Right. Yeah, good. Okay. That's a good question. We do have a 14-year agreement with the county to renourish the beaches. This year they don't want to do it because we have so many seawall projects under construction. They feel it's going to be in the way. But I can tell you that the city did budget $1 million this year. It usually costs $2.5 million for the entire project on Singer Island. We've budgeted $1 million, which is our share. It's not only a county project, it's a city and a county project. We do them jointly. We do have our $1 million budgeted. We will be looking for additional money, and we will work with the county in areas that we think we must put sand there in order to protect those properties. We did that last year when the county left. We did the Via Delfino and part of the Seawinds. That was a city project. The city did that on their own. It cost us close to $700,000 to do that project. They're putting their seawall in now at Via Delfino. But if we didn't put the sand there, the water would have been in their lobby. So clearly, we're not walking away from the issue or the problem. The city will deal with it, and I'm sure the county will come back after they do their studies. And I think they're going to realize that there's no more turtles after you do your study. Clearly, the turtles need the dunes to lay their nest. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think that's what we're doing right now. That's why the county and the city hired this engineering team to come up with the long-term solutions, not just one, not just breakwaters. We're looking at every option possible that could be permitted. Without a permit, we can say whatever we want, but if we can't get a permit, then you don't have a project. So this team has a success rate in getting permits approved, and I think we're on the right track now. I think you can see something happen in the next few years. Sue?
Chris, it would be, you want to talk about
Well, I mean, if we're looking at a July 2027 date for the feasibility study, I mean, that's going to give us an idea of what the preferred alternatives are. Then we have to go to our Board of County Commissioners, because right now the directive from our Board of County Commissioners is not to pursue an engineered alternative. So we have to take these alternatives and make sure that our board is ready to move forward on this. And then from that point, we have to initiate the regulatory process. And the regulatory process is extensive, because like we've talked about, there's so many protected resources here, whether it's the turtles or the hard bottom, the essential fish habitat. So, I mean, it could take 3 years to get through the regulatory process. I'm just being realistic. It could be the last time we went through this, we were in the regulatory process for 6 years. We submitted the application in 2006, and it was 2012 when the board decided that we are not going to get these regulatory agencies to agree, and we just cannot continue to spend money going down this path without some certainty that we're going to get to the point where we can construct a project.
That was the breakwater project, right?
That was the breakwater project, correct?
And the thing that's changed now is we are finally going to be getting some data that we can use to show that, look, what we told you was going to happen has now happened. We cannot just sit here and do nothing. So that's what we hope to impress upon the regulatory agencies in that process is we cannot continue to do the no action. We have to do something, so meet us in the middle. It'll still be a painful process, but it'll be very clear by the time we're 2 years down from the road from now that those impacts will be stacking up, and we'll be able to demonstrate it was much worse to do nothing and let the system go as it was than it was to try to break an egg and make an omelet, basically.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you commented a few minutes ago about a special project that's done by the city for one facility that have water for their front door. I appreciate the study working on national range, and you'll have a detailed budget going forward. How do you plan to charge those dollars to the upland? Obviously, some of the beach is publicly owned, but the vast majority is privately owned. So is it special assessments? How does that cost? How is that cost spread over the short?
Well, you have to look at what are barrier islands and what do they do. Barrier Island is there to protect the mainland from a major storm. They take the initial shock. That's why we have to beef up and protect the barrier island itself because it's protecting the mainland. We saw in Hurricane Sandy in New York, for example, when they did not protect the barrier islands, the water went up almost 3 miles into the mainland and caused billions of dollars worth of damage. Of course, the Army Corps of Engineers project was done the year after that. The city council didn't want to do that project. I was the city manager in that city before that. I tried to get that project done. The surf riders showed up. Everybody showed up to fight the project. And I told them that Hurricane Sandy was coming without using the name. I wrote an article. Those of you from New York know Newsday. I did a guest editorial there predicting that it was going to happen. It just, just when it was going to happen. And we didn't do the project and we had the damage. So now they took out all the old jetties and put in all new jetties for a 10-mile stretch. Brand new jetties, built up the beach, built up all new dunes, put in wave walls, which was an unusual thing, something we have to talk about, which works. And now they have a very stable beach. They have the jetties every 100 yards. So what's happening is you're protecting the whole city. So it's not just the property in front of the dune or in front of the seawall. You're protecting the entire mainland when you beef up and you protect the barrier island itself. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. When do we just get through saying?
Okay, so as the county said, right now they want to prove that having no sand means that bad things are going to happen, and they're going to go back to their county commission with their reports and say, we have to do something now. But the city isn't just going to sit back and let all the properties get destroyed. We do have $1 million, as I said, budgeted already for this year. We'll look for more. I know the city manager's back there right now going through the books. I know the director of finances is here. He's going to help us find some money, I'm sure. But we're not going to let the island just get washed away. We'll be on top of that. We're going to work directly with the county. Yes, we know that. The dunes, by the way, the dunes at the Waterglades, for example, are still pretty much intact from the project last year. They took very little damage.
Yeah, and that speaks to why we're doing the feasibility study. Is we're not able to continue keeping this dune in place through these storm events. So we're limited in our sand placement permit-wise by being able to place it on the upper dry beach. That's all the regulations will allow without impacting that nearshore hard bottom. So this feasibility study is the next step to place sand on the water side to start to build that beach back out. But right now, we just cannot do that in a permitting sense.
Yes, sir.
So the county has been engaged in dune restoration, obviously, over the long term. One of the things that's crunching us right now is budgetary considerations. The county's program is couched on public access. So we use the public access from the north, from MacArthur Beach State Park, and from the south, from Ocean Reef, to get state dollars to cost share on this project. Throughout the county, we require public access to cost share on our projects because our funding is derived from TDC bed taxes. So we're using this to say we're supporting the beaches because it supports our economy. That's how we're able to use those bed tax dollars to support our beach stabilization projects. Most of the other project areas that we cost share on throughout the county have 100% cost share for the entire beachfront. Singer Island's unique in that the central portion, there's about a half mile or so that does not have public access by the state's definition. So it's a little bit of a hole for us cost share wise, but accessibility is the biggest issue. So what we've seen over the past 3 years since tremendously rough conditions following Hurricane Nicole and the following winters was a lack of recovery of the beach. So we haven't been able to have a dry beach to place that material on. So the engineering efficacy, the engineering ability to place and hold a dune there has not been there. We've also seen seawall installation going on. So one of our primary accesses for the central area is East Point 2. They've been installing a seawall for the past 2 years. It's very good for them to protect their property, but now that it's installed and they're finished, they've got water up to their seawall. in a permitting sense, we cannot access the beach there because the state will not allow us to place sand directly in the water. So we're left with our northern and southernmost accesses. We have an access at Waterglades and Dunes Towers. It splits both properties on the north end. Dunes Towers, Sea Grape, Aquarius are all engaged in private wall installation this winter, and the dune is only damaged to a very limited extent on the southern end of Waterglades. So that kind of cuts that area out. We have no ability or need to go to that area because we don't have access. On the southern side with 5,000 and Ocean's Edge, the access is currently partially mobilized for Ocean's Edge to complete their seawall, and we have limited damage on the south end. But again, one of our biggest concerns is budgetary. The councilman mentioned the last couple restorations have been about $2.5 million project costs. Those were limited north and south end installations because we couldn't access the center part. Right now, a full restoration, if we had the beach to build on, will cost about $5 million. Sand cost is going like this, and stability on the beach is going down. So we are not totally opposed to considering dune restoration in future winters, but this winter, we don't see a practical way to get sand to the beach, both in terms of access or funding with the state's current budgetary condition. And just to touch on the state's budget, typically over the past 6 to 8 years, we've had tremendous surpluses from storm impacts. Starting in about 2019, the state set a baseline beach budget throughout the state for cost share of about $50 million. It's been closer to $100 million for the past 6 to 7 years because of supplemental storm dollars. There was no supplemental storm dollars, or there were no supplemental storm dollars associated with Milton from the state. And the budget is back to the baseline of $50 million for the first time this year in 6 or 8 years. And we have other projects that we're competing with, Port Everglades, that's asking for $60 million, larger beach projects that rank higher on the list. So our likelihood of getting funding this year is pretty much zero. We're going to apply. We're going to continue to apply in the coming years. But the cost effectiveness of the project, dune-wise, is going down unless we can stabilize the beach and get that state cost share.
All right, but I should add that the city will be in Tallahassee, and we will be lobbying our legislators there, and we're going to try and get them to change that state law on the public access, what the distances are. Because right now, technically, Andy, I think you said where the Condado is, if we had a public beach there, then all our beaches would be covered under that statute.
Throughout our project area, all of the easements that we use to construct the project require public access. So we're comfortable within our program saying there's technical public access, but the state rule says a half a mile from the limit of a publicly accessible park property. So that's why we use the property line of MacArthur Beach State Park and the property line of Ocean Reef. And those run about to the barrier between East Point 1 and 2 and to about halfway up Seawinds. So that central area is technically not publicly accessible per Florida Administrative Code.
Right, but I should add, in our agreement, I believe we pay a little bit more money to get those areas that are not covered.
So yes, with our 10-year agreement with the city for cost share, the city would pay 50% to make up for that state cost share for the central portion. But again, that's the area that we don't have construction access right now. So it's a twofold problem. It's budget and it's accessibility and engineering, again, efficacy of the dune.
Right, the city last year, when the city did the Seawinds, they were able to use when they did Via Delfino, the Seawinds let us use their access area. If you go there now, you'll see that they're using it for their seawall project over at Via Delfino.
Councilman. So I think you referenced that the county board is not supporting this, and then you reference multiple regulatory agencies that would be involved. Are they being dialed in now instead of waiting 2 or 3 more years for that to hopefully be a successful approval process?
So the board is supporting this feasibility study. They're the ones who executed it and are interested in getting this additional data. What they told us in 2012 was stop pursuing permitting for that structural solution because there's no permittable pathway to build this project at this time. Now that we've seen conditions change, that's where the board is saying, okay, we agree with you. We need to look at this again. So the board is supportive of the effort, but they need data to show that it'll be worth it to pursue it to permitting again. So that's the intent of the feasibility study. And then what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry? So that's why we have our engineering team that's very experienced with current permitting practices. They're going to speak to that in their report of what they believe will be permittable. We have some limited interaction that we had originally scoped with the agencies. But the problem is if you go to the agencies with a proposal, they're just going to want more information. So really we need to show what is most cost effective and what do we believe is permittable based on regional precedent over the past 10 years. And then we can pursue the permitting process. So we are going to engage with permitting agencies in a limited sense for this feasibility study, but we don't want to hand them a design to have them then say, well, we don't like that, we like this, and start to get into the weeds before we can at least see what's going to be cost effective for us.
And also the regulatory agencies are generally reluctant to make decisive comments in the absence of a permit application. You can't just go in there with that slide deck and say, what do you think? I mean, you could, but they're probably not, that's not going to be what's going to eventually happen when you drop a permit in.
And to that point, we've tried to approach the Army Corps with permitting dunes because typically an Army Corps permit isn't required for dunes. And we've just wanted them to comment that a permit isn't required per US regulations. And they've told us, we can't comment unless you submit an application. So that's where the federal government is at, is submit an application, tell us what you want to do, and then we'll go through our formal process.
Hi. Realizing that you're still collecting data, I realize it's at a very beginning stage, and your feasibility study. I'm just wondering the feeling that you have out of these 4 options, these groins that you talked about, which one you think at this point might be suitable for Singer Island? Which one would suit our purposes best? And I realize we're talking a long time coming, but just curious, out of all this information, which one?
Well, I think that
from an engineering standpoint,
all of them could be suitable, and that's the intent of putting them all up there on the slides, but it's a matter of what will you pay for it and what will the mitigation costs be. So all of them could potentially work, but that's the point of doing all the modeling that our engineering team will be engaged in, is to figure out what's the most cost effective. So we're going to use all of that new data to determine what is the most cost effective construction cost wise and mitigation wise. What will have the least impact to turtles? What will have the least impact to reefs? What can we afford to do within the permittability of each project?
I think the question was, do you have a favorite one right now?
So we had a favorite one last time and we leaned hard in that direction and it did not work well for us. The last time,
the 2006 to 2012 project, it started with originally 13 structures and then what they called a terminal groin. That then got whittled down to just 11 nearshore breakwaters. So that there's a lot of data that we were able to collect as part of that effort. A lot of modeling that was done as part of that effort. They modeled some different alternatives as part of that as well. So all of that information is being fed into these engineers so that they can take and really kind of digest everything else that's already been done and then sort of apply that to this new effort, because the shoreline's different. We've got seawalls everywhere. We've got a narrower beach. We've got less nesting habitat. So there's a lot of new conditions that they have to factor into this feasibility that were not part of the last one.
Quick question. You mentioned public beach accessibility. Right next to Via Delfino, there is a public beach accessible point, which will serve half of that island you were talking about. So there is public beach accessibility there. So if you missed it, if you forgot it, we had a wonderful gentleman that threatened to sue if they didn't clean that up, because that is a public beach access point. So it's there at Via Delfino. Number 2, as far as your turtles, sea turtles, endangered species, if you talk to our turtle conservationists, they will document and let you know that they had to scramble up and down Singer Island to try and save as many eggs as they could. And they also advertised it in the Palm Beach Post. So you already have a record of the adverse environmental impact they are having on our beach turtles. So just include their information, their gathering of the sea eggs this year, because it totally destroyed the sea turtle population on Singer Island. So that would benefit, and that is a heck of an adverse effect.
And that's exactly the data that we're looking to impress upon the agencies. So those sea turtle monitors are paid for by the county with grant cost share and cost share with the city to monitor the project to make sure it doesn't have impacts. But what we've seen the past two years has been during storm events, because that dune wasn't there in the central portion, waves were able to wash up onto the beach and wash out the nests much more easily. So that's exactly the kind of data that we're getting now that we didn't have before. Because of our inability to restore the dune, we're starting to get some of these results that are unfortunate, but are necessary to prove that this no action is not really no action. It is impacts. So we're very much wanting to use that data. And on the access adjacent to Via Delfino, unfortunately, the state's Florida Administrative Code says that you have to have a certain number of parking spaces, usually 50 or more, and a restroom facility to count for full accessibility. You could have some parking and no restrooms and be a secondary access. It's all a formula, but basically you have to have some component of parking to be able to have eligibility under the state's Florida Administrative Code. That's a different story for a different time.
Any other questions? Well, we would like to thank the director and her team for coming here. I've been working with them for many years. The engineers are doing a great job. Please, let's make it quick. We want to get this thing going, but we want to thank everyone for your questions and everything. We're going to move on from this. I want to thank, obviously, the team for being here tonight. You did a great job. Thank you.
We really appreciate the opportunity. And again, emphasis from us is we care about Singer Island. We want to see this project succeed. Nobody's more frustrated than we are about past efforts not succeeding, but that's what we want to impress upon the agencies moving forward. So that's part of this effort.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the county. Thank you. We're going to move on to the mooring fields. So if the city manager and I guess our director of finances could come up here. City manager is still here? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Good job. Thank you. Nice meeting you too. Thank you. You're gonna get from the city. Yeah. We have Sprague here, and we have Sherman. Randy, you want to start this? Okay, so if you're leaving, please leave and go out into the hallway so we can start the second phase, which is the mooring fields. That's the main thing that we're
All right.
You doing like PD stuff first? You're gonna do the PD stuff first? Yeah. So you don't need this up there. Not yet. Not right now.
You don't need the mic right now either, right?
No.
Okay.
All right. Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get into the second part of this evening's presentation to talk about managed mooring fields and specifically some enforcement-related activities.
I know that, man. I see it every Wednesday. It's not taking. That's where all the money is. Yeah, I said if you can sit up there for the time being.
Sing a song?
Testing.
All right.
All right. Ready?
We're ready. All right. Good evening again. I'm Jonathan Evans, City Manager, and here with me today, I've got a distinguished group of panelists.
Can I? All right.
Thank you. So we have a great group of panelists, but before we get into our presentation, I do want to take an opportunity to recognize one of our outstanding employees that he was actually preparing for this meeting, and so he missed his recognition of receiving Employee of the Year. And so I do want to take an opportunity to recognize Captain Glenn Myers with the Riviera Beach Police Department.
you for that. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to get into managed mooring fields, and we want to share a little bit of information that we've had the opportunity to have discussions with our partners at North Palm about some enforcement-related activities. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Assistant City Manager Coppin to introduce our partner here with North Palm Beach, and then we have our Assistant Chief, Mr. Nate Gordon, and our Captain Glenn Myers that's going to talk a little bit about some of the enforcement related activities that we're going to be doing from the City of Riviera Beach's perspective. But I think you'll be pretty fascinated to hear what North Palm Beach is doing to address derelict vessels in their community and some of the things that we're going to do to really push on some of the rules and state statutes that are in place to address some of the anchoring that we're seeing in our community. See you.
Good evening. Evan Coppin, the Assistant City Manager here in Riviera Beach. Prior to that, I was your Deputy Chief up until September. Prior to that, I worked with this young man in North Palm who ran the Marine Unit. It's Detective Shane Myers from North Palm. City Manager, actually, I didn't know what a mooring was until this month. He asked me to do some research on it because of what the city has planned going into the future. So I ended up calling the expert. Specifically from the enforcement standpoint of navigating on the water, leaving boats on the water, what happens when derelict boats get left, the entire process. What Detective Mize told us up here on the dais was kind of eye-opening. So he's specifically going to talk to you about what North Palm's doing, kind of not what Riviera Beach is going to do, but he's going to shape the comments to exactly what works in North Palm and what doesn't work. So I'll kind of turn it over to Detective Mize to kind of give you an overview and his experience.
He didn't tell me I was going to be up here, but anyways. So we were having a lot of problems with derelict vessels left on moorings. Of course, every storm, we'd end up with 2 or 3 are sunk. What happens is, people get boats, they don't want to pay dockage, and they leave them. And the worst thing you can do for a boat is put it on a mooring because they deteriorate very fast from the sun and everything else. A lot of people don't know how to maintain a boat, or they just kind of forget about it. So we got stuck with a lot of boats. We were getting a lot of complaints. And at one point, we were told that, we need to do something about it. So throughout the state of Florida, you don't see very many, but there is mooring fields. There is legal mooring fields, and they are marked. They're put in by the Corps of Engineers and the state. The moorings that are out there, an impromptu mooring, you can't just drop a concrete blocks and chain and everything down and put a mooring ball on it. For one, it's a hazard of navigation. It's not on it's not on a chart. It's not lit. It can be ran over. So it is a hazard to navigation. So we approached it from that aspect, along with the derelict, the vessels that were on their way to sinking. We were actually working on 2 of them, and the last storm that came through sunk both of them. So now you have vessels sitting on the bottom with fuel tanks that, that are going to leak. And there is a difference between anchoring and mooring. We have transient traffic. There's people coming from up north. They're going to anchor. They're going to go over to the islands, and that's all well and good. This year there was a House Bill 481 was passed that the larger counties could implement that a vessel can not be anchored for more than 30 days at a time. With a population of 1.5 million in the county. So it's by state statute, they have from the day they anchor, 30 days as a live aboard. So that was another avenue. And like I said, we weren't out to squash anybody's dream or anything like that. But the boats were becoming such a problem. And after a few days, they smashed up against the seawall, debris everywhere, and it was getting to be a pretty good mess. We at that point, we decided to go ahead and to remove the mooring balls because they're not permitted. They had no legal right to place a mooring, in the water. So we did remove the mooring balls that were unoccupied. The ones that were occupied, they have to have a Coast Guard approved 360 light at night, not a Home Depot solar light that they put on there. It has to be a 360 light approved by the Coast Guard. Most of the boats out there had no lights on them. Other things like just the items they were using for moorings. Some people were dropping engine blocks and putting a chain on them, just all kinds of things. But we were successful in removing 18 out of 19 boats from the bay, Little Lake Worth Bay up there. So, and it did change the looks of the bay. And people still come through and anchor and transit and, passing through. But it looks nothing like it did. And we really didn't have anything against it. It was the havoc they were causing. They were just, a lot of them were abandoned. A lot of the owners we had to try and track down. A lot of them become problems.
Didn't you say some of the moorings that are dropped there, people are using that as a business to sublease to boaters that are coming down?
Another thing we ran into, there was individuals that would put a mooring in, and more than one, and they would rent them out. Now, these are in state waters, or, they're renting these moorings out and making money off of it. And one thing that people don't realize is if you put a mooring in, with a chain, the tide changes in and out. The boat makes circles. That chain sits there and rubs in the sand on the bottom. I literally found a chain that started out 1/2 inch and down at the last few links that were rubbing on the bottom were down to like an 1/8 inch. I don't know what was holding that boat on.
So the city, but what we're getting to is that the city is planning on expanding and putting in its own mooring field. So we're just going to let you know what the issues we're dealing with on the enforcement side to where we're going to be when we do put in this mooring field regarding enforcement.
Right, but this issue has come up year over year over year, right? Last year was last, but every other year it's been served.
Yes.
So.
The issues still exist. The people are polluting the water, especially near, on both sides of Phil Foster Park. We're having problems that people aren't using, obviously not cleaning out their boats the way they should. They're going to talk to you about how they're going to be able to stop that. But the city took time to apply for mooring fields. And if you read in the newspapers, we were approved for 2. We were turned down for 1 because the people in Palm Beach fought against us, and we lost the one to the south near Peanut Island. But we were approved for 2 others, and that's what we're talking about. We held a town hall, I guess it had to be almost 2 years ago, right here. And we discussed the mooring fields. And we couldn't get anybody to agree that they wanted a mooring field at that point, because nobody really understood what it was and what we were planning. These were large-scale mooring fields that we were speaking about, but we've scaled it down now, and that's what we're going to talk about. We reduced the number of the boats that are going to be permitted to be there. We're going to enlarge the channels. So we're going to talk about that tonight and how we're going to move forward with this, and if we're going to move forward with this. They're going to talk. Yes, you're going to get a presentation.
So, thank you, Councilperson. And so just to expedite, I guess, the conversation with regards to the mooring field, the intent behind the law enforcement team here is that they are going to facilitate the enforcements that are provided for in statute. And so we are going to be taking a more proactive, more aggressive approach. You will see Riviera Beach out there in the evenings, on the weekends, on the water, almost 7 days a week to be able to address some of the challenges I think we all receive notifications that at any particular time that we receive that it's not safe to swim over by Phil Foster Park because we know those boats are dumping in that particular body of water right there. And so we've talked about with North Palm some of the enforcement related activities, able to board the vessels, the dye packets, going on and making sure they have the appropriate lighting, that they're navigable. We are going to work with them. They have 2 underwater drones that we're going to actually see if they are moored or if they're anchored and be able to address it. So we wanted to share with you that there are success stories right next door that they've been able to relocate 19 boats out. And we know that there's probably anywhere between 30 to 50 when you look holistically in the city that are problematic. And what we've seen is with North Palm's enforcement and with the town of Palm Beach's enforcement, they're now starting to come here. And so we wanted to inform people that we are going to start the enforcement activity, but also we want to have a conversation with you all about where we are as it relates to the mooring fields and the conversation. And so we did want to have law enforcement just hit on those things, but certainly if you have any questions, they can answer those questions and we can pivot right into the conversations on the mooring field.
Right. Just before we go, I just want to recognize that we have Councilwoman Commissioner Lisa Interlandi here from North Palm Beach. And we want to thank her for all her assistance. She's been working with us on the Lozman issue for many years now. Lisa is in charge of the Everglades Law Center, and she has taken Singer Island under her wings, and we appreciate all her help. She's been there every time we need her, and we thank you for that.
We have been extremely successful in dealing with our long-term mooring issue. It really does have a negative impact on the lagoon. I also say, I'm speaking for myself and on behalf of Everglades Law Center. I am the vice mayor in North Palm Beach, but that's kind of like a side thing. So I'm here on behalf of Everglades Law Center. But no, it's a huge deal when these boats stay there. They become derelict. They can cause serious damage. They're constantly sinking. They're constantly discharging and affecting our water quality. Long-term, liveaboards really do have a negative detrimental effect. And so I'm so proud of you guys for taking this on. And I'm honestly extremely glad to see you guys moving forward with the mooring plan. I know residents oftentimes have concerns about, oh, we don't want a mooring field near our home. But done correctly, it can reduce the impacts of long-term liveaboards and mooring in your areas. It can absolutely reduce the number of boats, and it can provide that assurance that you need that there's regular law enforcement presence, regular monitoring, regular efforts, and with fewer boats that are there currently. So I think you have a great opportunity here. I'm really glad to see you guys moving in this direction. So I just want to thank you, and thank you so much for doing this. It's a great presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that former Commissioner Julie Botel is here. She's been working on this issue for many years as well, and we appreciate you being here and participating with us. Thank you.
Yes, and certainly we understand that this is an important issue. It's a sensitive issue, and so we'll pivot into the mooring fields, and then law enforcement. If you'd like to have an opportunity to have a conversation with our team, they can tell you what they're effectively doing. But I do want to, recognize our partner at North Palm Beach that has been talking with us for the last couple of weeks and sharing the do's and don'ts, things that we can do. So it's a good collaboration, a good relationship, and the city manager was outstanding as well to help us facilitate the conversation with North Palm Beach. So when we talked about a managing mooring field, we're going to talk about 2 of them, and we have a couple subject matter experts. Mr. Sherman is our finance director by day, but also has become quite familiar with mooring fields and has helped facilitate the city moving through the process. And then Mr. John Sprague, that has worked with us as it relates to the facilitation of our entire marina that you've seen here. And I think he's been probably associated with bringing over probably $20 million worth of grant funds to help build what is the municipal marina here in the city of Riviera Beach. So certainly very well equipped. I do want to share with you as it relates to The mooring field, I know originally when we had the conversations, there was concerns about the mooring field that was in close proximity to Sugar Sands. I think originally it was anticipated that it could have what is 50 moors. I will tell you that's not what we're going to do. We are going to reduce that significantly to a point where we're looking at potentially maybe under 30. I will tell you also, we have had some correspondence from the county, and the county did articulate some concerns that they have with respect to a mooring field. And so whatever we look to do is going to make sure that it is sensitive to the residents in the surrounding community, that is done of the utmost quality. And I will tell you, you can rest assured that it's not going to be a City of Riviera Beach bona fide department that's going to be managing the mooring field. We will have a private contractor that has the experience, the breadth, and the depth that would manage the managed mooring field. Law enforcement will be involved as it relates to making sure that we don't have any issues in there, because I think some of you do remember, I think probably about a year and a half ago, Chief, we had a shooting that occurred out there, and we don't know who's on those boats. We don't know what they're doing on those boats. And right now, the do nothing option is not an option for us. And so we're looking, obviously, from the enforcement perspective, but also looking to move forward with the managed mooring field. And so as staff shares their perspectives and their thoughts and some things that we're looking to do, we definitely want to welcome your input. Councilperson Spiritus has been very intentional to make sure that this is a good thing, but we want to make sure the community is involved, that they support moving in such a fashion, and we do it in a way that's quality and does not compromise the quality of life that our residents in that particular area. I would also encourage you, if you have an opportunity, Jensen Beach has an outstanding managed mooring field, and it is an example for a lot of us throughout the state. And so that's an opportunity. If you're in close proximity or you want to go take a look at that, I've had conversations with staff over there about some things they've done. So lessons learned. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sherman and Mr. John Sprague to share a little bit about the managed mooring fields. We can put it online, and we can also get your contact information. We can email it to you as well.
1 second. All right, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Randy Sherman. I am the Chief Financial Officer, and I guess by default, and I'm not quite sure how, but by default, I've been working on these mooring fields for, believe it or not, 6 years now, trying to get these mooring fields permitted. And I'm going to turn this over to, again, more the expert here, Mr. Sprague, in a moment. But I did want to point out the mooring field that I have up on the screen here is the mooring field that is approved by FDEP over at Phil Foster Park. Okay, I know a lot of times you don't think that government listens, but how many of you were at the presentation that we did over at Sugar Sands probably 2 years ago? Okay. I'm going to point out on this slide here, if you see the channel that goes around the mooring field, it's 125 feet wide. And when we were over at Sugar Sands, we got a lot of comment that that's not wide enough. We want the moorings further away. So I do want to point out, you see the ones, and hopefully you can see them on the right-hand side and then over the top. They're circled in green, okay? We didn't shrink the size of the mooring field, but we are not using those green ones. So that literally takes 10 moorings out of the plan, okay? So it takes this field from 51 to 41. The ones in green are not going to be used, and you can see the note. This is actually the map that was provided with the approval from FDEP, okay? So those 10 moorings cannot be used.
that adds an extra 150 feet to move it, further offshore. As Mr. Evans said, we're looking to maintain the size of the field, but not necessarily install the remaining 41 moorings. So again, we have the ability to maybe take out another 10 or so and shrink the number of moorings that'll be here without shrinking the actual field. You heard the issues. If you don't have a mooring field, you really can't manage what's going on within that field, okay? I have here as part of this presentation, I'm sure you definitely don't want to go through it all, but the key to the whole process is the managed mooring field plan. That is signed off by FDEP, okay? And I will gladly share a copy of that with anybody who wants to see it. It's actually attached to the approval, and we will be taking that to the city council to get it codified in the city ordinances, okay? And I will tell you, I've reviewed a lot of these managed mooring field plans around the state. They are almost word for word identical. There's very little variation that FDEP allows, okay? But the plan is included. I know the concern always is, as the manager said, who's here? Everybody that goes in that mooring field will be registered, will be licensed, will be insured, okay? They can only stay there for a certain period of time, and they have to turn over. As part of the budget, we approved a full marine unit in the police department. So right now we have 1 marine officer. We've budgeted 4. If we find we need more than that, we will go back and we will add more, okay? As the mooring fields fill and they grow. We've also added additional vessels for the police department. We've got in the budget 2 pump out boats, okay, that'll go around and pump out the vessels. As the manager said, we have 2 mooring fields. The other one is northwest of Peanut Island, so it's on the other side. But we will have 2 pump out boats to address, taking the sewage off the boats that are out there. And we will have, again, more coverage with the marine units. And then the actual managers, who again will be a third-party firm, will have vessels to be able to go out, go up to the boats, get the boats registered, collect the paper, collect the documents, collect their payments. But the mooring field plan is very detailed, and these are just the headings, and it tells us what we can do, tells us what the harbor master can do, and tells us, the responsibilities of the boat owners. They can't run a business. They can't do maintenance. They can't, there's all certain things laid out in the plan that prevents the mooring field or assists the mooring field in operating properly and addressing the issues that you heard from North Palm when people go and they just drop anchor wherever they want. So again, I do have the detail here. I'm sure nobody wants to go through it tonight, but we will post this online. I know it was asked to be posted online. We can put the permits up online. We can put the graphics up online, and we certainly can put the approved management plans up online. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sprague, who can answer the more technical type questions. And maybe walk through a little bit again what's up on the screen.
So much fun to get old. We basically looked at putting in mooring fields as we were dealing with, number one, rebuilding our marina, but secondly, expanding it. Seagrass is pretty prevalent in most of the bottom land in our area. When you get down further south, it lessens because of the freshwater discharges in the canals, but we're fortunate that we have a lot of resources. We have Goliath Group that are in our city marina at the south end. It's pretty amazing what's there in the bottom. So when we looked at, number one is expanding the marina, which brings a lot of revenue into the city. And secondly, we're an international port of entry. So we have a lot of vessels that visit. Number one, we have the ones that come down from up north every year. A lot of those go to the West Coast, but they come down through here on the way there. And then secondly, is we have a lot of vessels that visit. They come all the way from Europe. So dockage is important, but if you walk down to our city marina, we're full. The marina revenue is quite good, which is excellent. But not only that, we're giving opportunities. But that problem of full is a major county problem. And it's not just Palm Beach County. Very difficult to build more slips and whatever. So when we looked at it, how can we take care of more vessels that arrive and come into our area for the winter or whatever? And that's when we devised, look at all the boats anchored out there, and most of them are anchored out there for two reasons. Number one, there is no available dockage, and what is available may be outside the cost they can afford to pay. It costs so much money to build marinas today. Unfortunately, the working class is getting locked out of waters. So we looked at mooring fields to clean up the area. So we know exactly all the information on the boat. We know it's seaworthy. We know it runs, that it doesn't discharge any sewage, who's on it, who owns it, are they insured, all the information, and they have to register that no different than the boats at the marina. So we know exactly who our customers are. And then we have the revenue base as well. So then the next question is, where do we put the moorings? And so we looked at the coast along our mainland and where our marinas and boat yards are, from Blue Heron down to the city marina. And we looked at the distances between there and the Intercoastal Waterway and determined there's a section out there by the waterway that's not doing anything. Now they got their channels, so we designed a field to go in there that is in between all the channels, Martin Marietta and Rybovich and Safe Harbor and everybody that's in the facilities. So the next thing is we looked at Phil Foster. We got a lot of boats anchored in there. History tells us in hurricanes they wound up all on top of the docks and the seawalls and the houses on the end. They wound up on Phil Foster. They wound up being sunk. Anchors and lines generally do not survive hurricanes. So we looked at that area as a good possibility. And then the third one was south between Palm Beach and West Palm in what I call no man's land, because riparian rights end at the first available channel. So that whole strip going all the way down to the bridge is basically no riparian right to be the West Palm or Palm Beach. So the next question is, how many boats? How do we design it? What's the depth? So we had to look at all those issues. Now, what do we do for a mooring? If you go up north, it's usually chains and blocks and all kinds of stuff. Why? Because there isn't the same kind of resource on the bottom. So we decided to use helices. They put high-rise condos on helices. What we do for the boats is we have a diver pneumatically actually screws these into the ground. And as they do it based on the pressure, tells us whether or not we got to add another 5-foot section. And we keep adding sections until we get the engineering load that we know that the helice is not going to come out of the ground. Normal hurricanes. Nobody can plan for 4s and 5s. But Ones and twos, we believe that the boats will survive, and they won't survive on anchor. So, secondly is that when you put a helice in, then you have a stretchable piece of fabric that's been designed that stretches and whatever, but nothing touches the bottom. There's no chain. There's just a 2-inch diameter, well, it's 1 3/4 inch diameter shaft that comes out of the bottom about that far. And then this flexible thing goes up to the buoy. And then from there, there's a pendant that goes to the boat. And those are being designed max. So pretty much, they're not going anywhere. Additionally to that, we intend to have them inspected on an annual basis by the people that put them in, change the parts, change whatever needs to be, because on the bottom, you've got parts that are wearing all the time. Give an example, they were going to use a galvanized, we went to stainless steel, we went bigger to make sure that they don't go anywhere. The key is that we get boats that don't break loose, regardless of winds, other than like Cat 4 and above, hurricanes, Cat 3 actually and above. So that's the type of it. The secondly is you want to make each mooring in a circle that the boat, regardless of what direction it goes, it can't hit another one. And the reason being is sailboats have very little windage compared to a powerboat, but sailboats currents. So you have boats that are not necessarily in line with one another. And that's why you make the circles. And each one is designed for a max of a boat. We have to, by law in Florida, we need an upland support facility. We're fortunate that we have a good marina. And so we can supply parking, we can supply showers, and restrooms and garbage and all the things that are required to make sure those boats do not discharge anything in the water. And the pump out boats will pump them out 5 days a week. And we're going to have 2 mainly to make sure that there's always one available and working while the other one's down. Like anything else mechanical, they need maintenance and they break. Let me see what else. I don't know. Let me go to questions. I think that's what we're going to build. Yes.
Now have data from the marina in terms of the revenue. And I think that you were projecting what the lease rate was going to be for this mooring field, and how that was going to support the infrastructure for both the pump out boats as well as the law enforcement. Do you now have actual cash flows that you can sort of narrow in to say how this is going to operate? And is Riviera Beach and the county of Palm Beach going to be able to sustain this? What we don't want is it's put there and then it's not used as intended. I have several questions, and I know other people want to talk. So, but in regards to the finances of it, I have questions on the law enforcement. I have questions on the duration that somebody would be allowed to say, piece of the rock's been there for 7 years. I saw the police boat out there the other night with all the flashlights. I live right in 1051, I live right on the corner. That's the first time I've seen a night surveillance where you went to each boat with a spotlight, and went to their anchors, a floater, I've been boating for 40 years. That was the first time, and I'm just a resident, that I've seen that happen, and it happened just 2 nights ago. I thought it was in preparation for this meeting, where they literally went boat to boat in Lake Worth in front of Phil Foster to see whether anybody was on the boat, if the lighting was correct, whether it was anchored. Yeah, I watched for an hour and a half as the law enforcement boat went around, and I thank you for that, because I think you learn a lot that I actually observe every night. So I have questions on the law enforcement. I have questions on, you say that there'd be a maximum lease term. What is that? In Newport, Rhode Island, it's 2 weeks. In Riviera Beach, is it going to be all winter? Like, how are we going to control this stuff? If that's in the backup data for the administrative regulation, I'm happy to look at that. that I have, and again, I'm a voter, I've cruised all of the British Virgin Islands. We have a sailboat, we have a dinghy. I don't see individuals in this area going all the way under the Townhall Bridge to the dinghy dock down at the Town Riviera Beach Marina. I feel like you have to have a different plan, because you're either gonna try to get to the supermarket or the liquor store, which means you're gonna have the dinghies going to perhaps some of the private docks to get to shore. How are we gonna monitor that? I mean, as a voter, am I gonna really at night travel from opposite Peanut Island to in front of the Boston Park? I don't think so. That's not what happens in Newport, Rhode Island. That's not what happens on Rockland Vineyard. That's not what happens in Edgartown. That's a great distance to travel from a dinghy to go take a shower or offload your rubbish. So what is the contingency plan for that? Because that's great voting distance to get off the boat, and you're gonna have a launch that has to take people off with their rubbish, etc. Again, 40 years voting. I don't think it's realistic that people are gonna travel that far at night under the Townhall Bridge, in the channel, in front of Riverbench, etc., to go drop off the trash.
First of all, the occupied vessels, we're gonna pick up the trash when we do their pump outs. And that's in the management plan. You need to look at the management plan. That covers all kinds of stuff.
And the showers, they're gonna be, how far is that from this proposed mooring field to where the showers would be? Probably over a mile.
I don't know, it's 20 miles. What's Blue Heron? I don't know either, but it's somewhere around that period. You know, I've done a lot of cruising. Granted, all my dinghies have engines on them. But that's not a big deal to run that. Doesn't mean that you have to go at night. Doesn't mean you have to go in the day. You can go when you want to. But it's, if you go down to Dinner Key and you go to most mooring fields, they're not on top of the restrooms. They're not on top of the grocery stores. You know, they understand that. That's part of boating and cruising. We are going to look at putting a floating dock at the end of Blue Heron underneath the bridge on the west side, that they can then dock there and walk up to Publix, which is a half a block, and Walgreens is a half a block further than that. It'd be underneath Blue Heron Bridge on the west side. We had a permit actually to put one in there some years ago. Anyway, we're also going to we're looking at a shuttle boat that during certain hours to be determined, that will pick you up on your boat, take you to City Marina, where you can get public transportation, and bring you back to the boat during certain hours, during certain days that will be determined somewhere down the line. That has to be determined. Most of the mooring fields in Florida, they're allowed to stay a reasonable length of time. State of Florida, if you are a true live-aboard, you are limited to 6 months, period.
6 months.
However, that 6 months, when I say what a live-aboard, a true live-aboard under state definition says that that is your only residence. You don't own a home anywhere else. So it excludes a cruising boat, which is coming down. They got their home up in Canada or whatever, and they come down. They can stay longer if they want to. And that's the way the state law is written. It's up to the city. I'm laying things out, building them, you know, giving the city staff and whatever and the council what I believe should go in, not my decisions on what happens and how many there are. We are just trying to build top grade mooring field that will service boats in our areas, so we don't have very many out there. And if you don't have very many out there, the bad ones hide. Yeah, because inside of, I was just down on the boats before I came here to this meeting with a patrol boat, Riviera Beach, and we went all over the 3 of them that were proposed, how many there are out there, you know, what they look like,
to look at the changes since we started to work on these, you know, Palm Beach issues and whatever. I will say that we've got a large number of boats off the main part of Riviera Beach between Blue Heron and the city marina. Bill Foster's got about the same. Correct. I counted those, 27. And, you know, I've seen it down to 15, 16, and I've seen it up to 40.
And then the other question that I have, just because again, I have literally our voters, right? So if your category is 4 storms without the kick, our moving is required that we vacate the mooring and the dock. Are you gonna, is that all of a sudden gonna be where all the boats go because they didn't take place? And then how are we gonna identify us with the seawall insurance and those boats in grade 3 and cat 4 or a cat 5? Will the town be liable for the damage to our property because you've now given them a haven to bring in?
No, in the contract, the owner is responsible for that boat to remove it. If he doesn't, he's the one that's liable. We're not liable.
So will law enforcement be able to enforce that check of insurance prior to a large storm when people start to do it? I mean, I lived with Hurricane Bob, I lived with Hurricane Gloria in the Northeast, right? So what happens is everybody does a mass exodus off of dock to get to a secure place. That is about as secure as it can get. But how are you gonna check the insurance once they do that mass exodus? And you're 8 hours on the storm horizon, you may have a lot of boats that go there and you won't have the capacity to be able to check that. So is there gonna be some kind of insurance that you'll be monitoring, especially in those emergency management situations? Because as a voter, that's exactly where I would go with my 33-foot sailboat.
How do you get the assurance of your boat and the rest of them that are out there have any insurance at all?
Right, I know.
And there's no control on them whatsoever.
Basically putting an ideal spot for larger boats to more in catastrophic situations. You have to have a way to monitor that if something happens, they have the insurance, and it's gonna have to be on an emergency basis.
All I can tell you is I believe we are going to respond that they have to carry a form of liability insurance. What that's going to be is not above my pay grade.
So if I can, I'd love to get you, and if anybody else again wants it, a copy of the plan, the approved plan. And I seriously would love to have a conversation with you once you've gone through it and, you know, the way I understand it. And again, we're in the process. We've had the same management firm at the marina itself, and we're going through a new process, solicitation process. So I don't know who will be managing it going forward. And it may be the same firm, but we don't know that at this point. They would actually collect the insurance up front, you know, all those insurance certificates up front when they're coming in, or they can't more. They can't come into the field. So, you know, all of that's going to be up front. It wouldn't necessarily be the police department's responsibility. It would be the management company's responsibility, because again, they're the ones doing the leasing. Now, the enforcement part, that's where, you know, we're adding to the Marine Patrol. So again, they can have more hours in the area, more vessels in the area, and be there to enforce the management plan should it, you know, really come to that. But
one
again,
other thing I should mention, I also affiliated with the Marine Industry Association of Florida, and we just changed the law that now no vessel can anchor within 300 feet of a mooring field. And part of that is, so when the mooring goes in, then all of our landowners are protected by not only the mooring field have no anchored out boats, but the distances between them, there's no place for them to anchor there. And they're going to need to go somewhere else.
The other question that I think is helpful, and again, I've been at the top.
Yeah. Young lady, let me see whether we have some other questions in the room.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
And that's one of the reasons why we're doing it, because there won't be any more seagrass damage. They're gonna have plenty of food to eat on the bottom, because there won't be any anchor and chain damage.
So I had my hand up quite a while here. The question, and you may have said it, and I didn't understand you, was how many are at the Phil Foster Park now?
There's 51 that's been permitted. That doesn't mean at the end of the day that the city's gotta build 51. We can alter that plan, or what you're gonna have to do if we're gonna do that though, is we're probably gonna have to redesign the mooring field officially, move it back.
No, I'm asking how many are there today? How many actual boats?
27 on the trip I took today.
So and they're scattered. They aren't in any sort of order.
Well, then, because every time that somebody else comes in, they anchor. And that's one of the problems with a mooring field, because they destroy the seagrass. And they come in, they anchor in another place. The Helicity, I got pictures of the seagrass growing right up to that 1.75-inch shaft. There's no damage at all to the manatee food.
Okay, so there's 27 now in that area.
27 today.
Hello, I live at Sugar Sands, and you're saying there's 27 more mooring fields in the lagoon now?
No, there are 27 anchored
Boats.
in the
Yeah,
lagoon.
okay, so they've been there for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. How can you confident that they're gonna take those out? I mean, if you
They
can't get
have
rid of those
to.
27
If we get a
boats-
lease on it, our police department can deal with them with no problem whatsoever.
Deal with them how? Like, I wave him every morning. He's looking at me, I'm looking at him. He's been there for 6 years.
You can't do it. There's a law that says when we put that land under lease and we have a proposed mooring field, there is no anchoring allowed by law within the mooring field or within 300 feet of the mooring
I
field.
understand that, but what about the people who are there now?
They're
Who
gonna
shouldn't be
leave.
there? They're
What
gonna-
happens when somebody's pitted?
Oh, so you're gonna move them out? When?
Oh, yeah, they gotta
When?
go.
When?
So the way I understand it, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, is when we open up the mooring fields, the vessels that are there get priority to lease. Okay, they can stay and lease and follow all the rules, or they can, pull up anchor and go somewhere else.
Well,
And then again, we have the requirement to rotate that around. So as, Mrs. Sprague said, if it's 6 months, okay, you're gone in 6 months, you can get at the back of the line. If nobody else comes in, you can come right back in and release. Or, somebody else now has the opportunity to come in.
You can enforce, regardless of mooring field, 28
That's
boats out
correct.
there. There's
That's correct.
28 illegal moorings out
Yeah,
there.
we can enforce,
None of those are legal. None of those
right.
moorings are legal.
Florida State Statute 327, I can remember the last, but we can enforce. And that's what we're gonna do. Yeah, we can enforce now. So we're gonna, what we're doing, that's why we came here. I didn't get a chance to speak. I'm Assistant Chief Gordon.
I think that's great, because
Yeah.
I have to, on the lake on the east side. I call, there's a little boat that goes out there and puts them down. I go out of my dock and I yell at them. I say, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, it has to be properly registered through the Coast Guard, yes.
Call the Riviera Beach Police. They couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I'm
we,
hoping that will change. I mean, I'm glad you guys are doing it. I know North Palm Beach has done it.
Yes.
And I was shocked when I drove my boat up there. You talk about by the little lake work, and there were no boats. Shocked.
So yeah, that, our main focus the first year, which was last year, our main focus was the derelict vessels. But we were able to move 10 derelict vessels out of the water, no cost to the taxpayers. It all came through the Florida Fish and Wildlife derelict vessel grant. So we did all that. Yeah, so we partnered with. Oh yes, we.
Don't wait for the mooring field to start enforcing.
Absolutely. That's to piggyback off the city manager. That's what we're doing. We're gonna go out. It's gonna be an educational component.
part of the first phase of the 7 days, and then to the 14th day, we're going to partner with North Palm Beach and our Coast Guards, and we're going to go out, and that's where we're going to drop the dive, the underwater drone. So yeah, you're going to see some of those boats. They're going to be moving out of there because they're not going to be in compliance.
Chief, if I may elaborate a little bit further. So Glenn Meyer, Captain, Riviera Beach Police. We've been working very hard the last few days. I know you mentioned that you saw us out there a few nights ago. So I just moved recently over to the Community Services Division the last few weeks. So I'm going to be overseeing the Marine Unit as well as other functions in the city. So we sit here committed in the mission that the reason why everybody's here tonight, right? We want to make sure that the waterways are safe. We want to make sure that the laws are enforced. So you're going to be seeing us out on the waterway more than you've ever seen us before. And we're going to be looking at enforcement across the board. So I know you mentioned a few minutes ago about manatees in the water. We started manatee enforcement just in the last few weeks. We're going to be doing that each weekend. Absolutely, absolutely. So this is going to be a full operation that we do. We're going to be testing these vessels to make sure that the waste products aren't going into the water, as the city manager pointed out earlier. We're going to be checking to make sure that the lighting on the vessels are United States Coast Guard approved. We're going to be looking at all those aspects. So every single vessel that's in that waterway, we're going to lay eyes on it. And if there's violations, we're going to address those. We're not going to, we're not going to continue with what we've been doing, right? Because we recognize that maybe in some ways that hasn't worked, okay? But the team is here committed to doing that. And I wouldn't be here tonight speaking to you if we weren't committed to that. The chief is here, the city manager. I commend the Commissioner Spiritus for spearheading this. This is going to be the day of change, and we all need to do this together. So thank you for that.
And to add, one other thing to add, Mr. Sherman was speaking on the mooring field is going to add one potentially 4 Marine guys. We currently have a robust program now. We went from 2 Marine units personnel. Now we have 8. So we're one of the biggest Marine units in the county besides PBSO. So we have 8 right now that I can call and say, I need somebody on the boat. We got 8 to choose from with this 8.2 square mile city. So we're fully committed, the chief, city manager, they're fully committed to get our waterways back safe.
The guy with the mic, I'll come up there. So my name is Alex Hill. I don't think I need this. My name is Alex Hill. I reside at 3040 Lakeshore Drive. If you were to zoom out on this map, okay. If you were to zoom out on this map and draw a line due west from the Tiara, you'll run right into my building. We're the little 10-story building over on Lakeshore Drive. I'm the president of that condo association. I'm also a boater, a racer. I'm past Commodore to Palm Beach Sailing Club down at 45th and Flagler. And we have about 40 members who currently have boats out in that part of Lake Worth on a variety of moorings that they've installed, professionally installed, in fact, over the years. In fact, I bought a mooring system out there many years ago and had a 45-foot catamaran I managed on it. I paid $2,000 just for the mooring system. So to paint a brush that these are just blocks of concrete and engine things thrown out there is rather disingenuous. Most of the responsible boaters currently on moorings have paid good money to have moorings, much as Mr. Sprague has talked about and so on. John and I know each other well. So I applaud what Riviera Beach is doing because the county has buried their head for years. These waterways are the county's responsibility, and they've just done a bang-up job doing nothing for years. The boats, the derelict boats, the pumping waste in the water. Let's not kid ourselves. Who was responsible for policing this for many, many years? It was the county and then all the municipalities under. So, Riviera Beach really should be applauded for taking the initiative to do something. And I think it's unfortunate that you're not going to be able to pursue the bigger mooring field south of Peanut Island, and the town of Palm Beach is deluding themselves over their jurisdictional issue and doing nothing there. What's really going to play out? Because the responsible boaters are the ones that they'll be able to look up the FL number and get in touch with them and talk to them and kind of threaten them about leaving. The derelict boats have no owner you can track down. They're going to be your problem. And you talk about getting rid of derelict boats. Where did they go? Where did you take them? I wonder. So I hope you have think through this. Then you're going to have, and this is a complicated issue, and I've been on this, and Ely here with me for years. You have another class of boats out there that are, semi-abandoned, partially, used by some people that come and go. They may live on them from time to time. And those are concerns because they may be pumping waste into the water. And then you have responsible boaters who do live on very nice yachts, talking multi-$100,000 boats out there. And they would love to have the opportunity to have their boat pumped out properly. But again, the county has failed to do anything around that for years. The town of Palm Beach has failed to do anything about policing their own waters for years and the boats that are there. So now we get down to this. And I can tell you, build as many as you can because we can fill this mooring field tomorrow night. Aside from everything I mentioned I do, I'm also financial manager of a multi-million-dollar marine electronics and electrical company. We service majority of our business is catamarans. These are sailing catamarans, 45, 60, 70 foot long, $1 million yachts that people live on. And they don't live on them all the time. And there's really very little place to store and dock a catamaran these days. So a mooring is an excellent place for these boats. They will spend hundreds of dollars a month. I myself, my little sailboat, I'm currently spending over $10,000 a year to dock that boat at Lake Park Marina. I would much rather be giving my own hard-earned money to my own city of Riviera Beach than to the town of Lake Park. Thank you very much. So please build this mooring field. What I wanted to hear tonight is when. No more talk about what it's made of, going back to 2023. Where's the timeline? When will this get implemented? Thank you.
The bad timelines, we got DEP. The problem right now is the U.S. Army Corps. It doesn't respond to anything they are just, pardon?
Speaking to Mike. The mic, John.
U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is the problem. We got an email, I forget, yesterday, day before yesterday, from the supervisor locally of the Corps office, who said, well, I'm going through the public comment cards that we received. We put those out 1 year ago, and they're just looking at them. That's the kind of response you get from the Army Corps, because there is no timeline. I think you're having the same problem on the beaches. The Corps needs to be fixed. But anyway, we're waiting on the Corps permits, and I think we're getting close. And then my comments on the south one is that hopefully the city will not give up on that project. Palm Beach doesn't like it. Palm Beach doesn't have they don't own it. The state of Florida owns it. You and I own it. That is state bottomland. And that's owned by everybody in the state of Florida.
Quick question, is there any negotiability on the number of moorings? So if let's say the crowd here tonight, we're talking about 51, and everybody here said, all right, we could sell for 25. But is that a possible thing or no?
Don't ask me. I looked at the area on how many you can put in safely.
All right, let the councilman on his page tonight.
Yeah, that's why we're here today. Yes, we realized when we had the last town hall meeting, I guess that was almost a year and a half ago, the people thought it was too many slips, too many boats. So we've been working on reducing the number, and people wanted the wider channels. So we're making wider channels and reducing the number of boats. So we haven't come up with a final number yet, but I think as the city manager said, we're looking at the 30 number, around that number right now for the mooring fields.
I have a question.
And we will stay, by the way, on top with our members of Congress to make sure that the Army Corps of Engineers gets back to us.
Hi, thank you. So I'm one of the neighbors near Sugar Sands, third house from Sugar Sands. And I think that no one would object to us having a mooring field. It's the number. And I'd like to know a couple things. Number one, those green circles there are really the closest to our homes. And I understood Mr. Can't think of your Sprague to say earlier that those are non-liveaboards. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then
Non-occupied.
Is that what you
Also,
told me?
Those little white spots. when
I
you
know
look
what
at
the
that
white spots are. What are the the light green circles?
The green ones that you read up top, those were not designed for anybody to stay on those boats.
So
there's a buffer, another 150-foot buffer that would have been away from you for noise and whatever.
Okay, wait a minute, wait a second, just a second. Wait a minute. So what are the green circles? Are you taking those out?
Sounds to me like the city, that's what they want to do.
No,
That's not up to me.
What's the answer?
You gotta ask the city
So you're
manager.
taking
I
out
think you heard
10.
from him, they are going to
Randy.
reduce the number.
No, but because you know what? Why are they there? They're all numbered.
Okay, so the
I'm not
field,
finished.
the field has 21 moorings, if you count them. 51 moorings, right? Those 10 green ones, okay, after the last meeting, we went back, those 10 green ones are the ones we're not planning on using. Those are the first 10 that are coming off the board. To
All right,
to
so
give
you're-
you, now again,
So you're taking out the
we only have,
anchors?
I think we only have one vote in the room right now, but the staff's recommendation is those 10 are the first 10 that come off. Now, the question is, now we're down to 41, if you want to try to get down to 30, it doesn't matter which 11 to staff, we have to consider. So if the county, for example, right there in the middle is where the sheriff's dock is, if they want more room in that area, maybe we take a few off the bottom. Maybe we take a few off maybe we open it up in the middle, but the other 11 haven't been identified yet, right?
The question is though, if this is the plan that's before whatever the permitting agency is, and they approve this plan, 3 years down the road, you get everything else full, is Riviera Beach gonna come back and say, well, now we're gonna rent those out?
No, you can't rent them out because I'm gonna alter the plan because we're not gonna use them.
Okay, so
So
there will
I
be
need to
something in the plan that they are not
redesign the
using.
mooring field and reapply to DEP to modify the permit.
Okay, so the permit is not gonna show those as included.
Right, so here's the thing. So we wanted to show you the original document that we started off with, right? And so now the modification, we understand that we've heard through, communications with persons that they had some concerns. So we're looking to shrink that. Like I said earlier, the county did provide us a letter that said they had some concerns with respect to the sheriff's vessels, as well as there's an artificial reef in close proximity. So there's additional modifications. So we will redesign that. And I think it's safe, probably, councilperson, to redesign something around the 30 that we can then share with you all to say, okay, this is what the redesign, but we have to have subsequent conversations with the county. But like we said, we heard what the concerns were from the community, and we're going to look to address those accordingly in what the redesign
One
looks like.
follow-up question, will that affect, like I know right now the way it's, like I said, I'm on the east side next to Marie, actually. And I don't want to have an area between the edge of the mooring field and my dock where these derelict boats are going to come in anyway. So
Right, well-
Okay, so it's not going to affect the overall, I guess it
Right.
would be the eastern end of that.
Yeah, you got that 300-foot limit. And also, you have situations where, if it's in close proximity to a dock and a mega yacht service, there's so many other things that we found out in our conversations that it really kind of squares some things off. But we will share that with you all once we move forward with the redesign.
Okay, one more question. So what are you going to do to mitigate the noise? Because if you're going to have, let's say 40, let's say 30 boats, that's really 60 because everyone has a dinghy. So right now we have, because I hear it every night, is we have air conditioners, generators, people talking, music. And I mean, from where I live, I hear partying at Phil Foster Park. I hear the train whistle, we hear everything happening over at the Ocean Mall. But right there is where the biggest noise, the greatest, closest noise is. So what are you going to do about that?
You know, one of the things I will tell you, and that's from an enforcement perspective, from a law enforcement, obviously, when you do go with the managed mooring fields, you are attracting a certain level of clientele that understands that there are rules and regulations and the like. And so I don't see it a situation where it will get worse. I think invariably it will get better, especially like I said earlier, that this is not going to be a situation where you're going to have an 18-year-old kid that's going to be out there. It's going to be a professional company that this is what they do, and they are doing this throughout the state of Florida. So it will be at a higher level than what you're experiencing now. So we will make sure there's rules, regulations, and we will share the plan as Mr. Sherman communicated to you, because I'm sure there's probably some restrictions as it relates to noise and amplified sound and the like.
I can hear the generator, and I can hear the generator.
So
multiply that out.
So as it relates to the boats, right? If that boat is not meeting what all the other standards are,
It's the
I
noise.
think the captain's going to be out there here in the next day or so to effectively try to do that. But you know, we would look to. I will tell you, in the managed mooring fields that you'll see, and those things are of a higher caliber. You don't have the same types of issues that you are currently experiencing now.
But you know what? I do think, though, that we're still going to have a lot of noise just because of the location of where, we're sort of a little harbor, quiet little area. And we also have a lot of, my main concern, apart from what I just described, is that we do have a lot of manatees and conch and starfish and all sorts of little areas there. And I can't quite figure out why having, let's use that design as an example, why 51 boats that are moving around all the time with people moving all the time is better than 27 who don't move.
Because they don't affect the bottom. That's law, that's where your resource.
But how does 51 better than 27?
But we're not going to go with 51.
All right, wait, I understand, but I'm going, so why not put in 25?
Well, that's what we're planning on doing.
25,
That's what we're planning to do. Come with a number significantly less, and to mirror what you have.
You'll read in the manual about sound, noise, and whatever. There's actually when the highway things, you have to shut the music down. But also you burn sailboat slack, the halyards. They better time off, period. They don't, they're gonna get thrown out. We try to look at everything that would bother you.
Specifically you, Marie.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I understand that the green circles are being omitted, okay, and that makes a lot of sense. And I live just to the north there. One thing that I see that we've discussed, this lady that was just talking and I, the east perimeter and the north perimeter are both very shallow, okay? And I'm sure you're aware of that because you did all the design.
We did.
And what you're doing with that east perimeter and north perimeter, in those shallows, and you take sailboats with their center keels and so on and so forth, you kind of created channels on the east and the north, okay? We really don't care about the south because it's no residences, okay?
No.
But you have shallow water and keels that are 6-8 feet, okay, and so on and so forth.
It all depends, each mooring will have the depth of the vessel that can go in there
Mm-hmm.
and that information. So the person that assigns boats to the mooring.
So you're going to classify, and you won't let that boat get in there, or you're going to tell him he has to approach.
Based by size, and we will assign a buoy that has sufficient depth
Uh-huh.
and sufficient length for that particular zone.
So you're going to tell him how to make his approach to his mooring.
Correct.
So you're going to put him out here someplace
Yeah.
if he's heavy, deep,
Okay.
And he's got plenty, if you look at the white boats that are out there now, they've got plenty of room to maneuver.
Well, you know what I'm talking about because you're a mariner, okay? Yeah, but what he just told me that satisfies me is he's gonna size the boat and then put the boat in an appropriate mooring for that
We're
depth.
we're also designing two strength moorings, a
Uh-huh.
maximum which is made for major sized boats as well as hurricane protection.
Mm-hmm,
And smaller boats don't require that much.
right.
So there'll be different moorings for that based on, so when they say a size, even though the circle's the same,
Mm-hmm,
this one maybe only has a 35-foot boat. This one could have a 50-foot boat.
got it. All right.
Yeah, really 50 feet, Sith. And it's a 150-foot circle, so there's still lots of room in between.
And this gentleman just told us that not only were the 10 eliminated, but you may eliminate 10 more or
Right.
15. You may
Right.
go to 25 or 30, which would satisfy a lot of my neighbors. I can
Well,
tell you that.
that's
who
what we
aren't
heard.
here because it's the time of year. It's the season and they're not here yet. They would be here had it not been close to Christmas. But a lot of them that live there and next to Marie and so on and so forth are just saying, you know what, it's getting a little crowded when you put those moorings in there. So I guess we wouldn't have that big a problem if you'd cut that number from 41 down to 25, maybe 30. But this evening, when I counted before I came here, there were 28 boats north of Phil Foster.
And a good many of them are derelict.
Now, well, my count was 28. Maybe I missed one, but or added one too many. But I want to applaud the police chief for saying what he did about taking care of what should have or could have been and wasn't taken care of for years. He made a lot of sense and satisfied a lot of people, including me, with that. So what you're saying, Greg, makes sense. If you got a deep keel, you're going to handle him and keep him out towards that main channel. So you're not going to tear up and you're not going to make that a channel. And if you eliminate another 10, 15 moorings, it would be much appreciated if you did it on the east and north perimeters.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. We want to close now. Or yeah, one more question and then one more question. Okay.
Mary Smith, I've emailed you a lot, Dr. Spiritus. 1131, we are kitty corner to, I just got it wrong, 3025, the one I emailed you about. You talk about big yachts. It's not the big yachts, it's the crew. We had a 130, 40-foot yacht next to us for months. The owner was never there, the crew, the police had to be called. 11 o'clock at night, we're asking them to turn it down. They're heckling back, what, you want it turned up? What do you want to hear? We've lived through that. And when finally Dr. Spiritus, really, I got him involved and he was very helpful. They threatened to bring yet another boat between them and our seawall. We're right on the seawall. And that's when I said, all right, I'm going to see if this is legal. If it is, we have a choice. Do we move? Do we not move? So it can be a real nightmare. Like I said, I have a lot of questions and concerns. What are the white dots? You were talking about the white dots. Okay, all right, I missed that.
The other advantage is when we have a boat, the way it is now, if someone keeps bothering you, there's really not much you can do about it. We can throw them out and he's got to go.
Well, this was a homeowner, sadly. And they are gone. They are gone.
Oh,
It's a whole, and I think it changed. I think it sold, thank goodness. I guess I would, I mean, I know we want to close. I would suggest another town hall at Sugar Sands after the new year, because there are a lot of people that have a lot of questions and concerns. And this, or have a night like this again, with this being the only subject, because coming in second, it wasn't really, not fair, but I have a whole list of things I'd like to talk about and ask about. And I know we all want to go home, so.
Well, we can definitely come to the Sugar Sands and hold a meeting for the people there because you seem to have major concerns there. So we'll do that. We'll come back there. And most of the people will be back by then too. Okay. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. And you all have a happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year. Thank you.